So I listen to a lot of right wing people, and some. No, I don't listen to anyone in the alt right. I listen to a few people in the alt right and a few people a little back towards the center from that. But one thing that seems to be a big problem is that people are mostly worried about building up their own status as internet celebrities and pushing an ideological viewpoint that's a little different from the other guy's viewpoint, which is a little bit different from the other guy's viewpoint on down the road. So the people are mostly committed to either themselves or an ideology rather than advancing a cause that we would probably all agree would be better. Another big problem is that people don't really trust each other. Someone will say that other people are working for the government or that they're just in it for money or whatever. There's just not a whole lot of trust. And even individuals that previously were close will have a big falling out, either due to personal drama or somebody was hiding information about their ethnic background or their family situation or some kind of stuff like that comes up, and everything just goes to pieces. It just falls apart. And you really don't have any way to disagree or argue with people about a lot of these points. If someone says that Richard Spencer is an agent of the U.S. government or something like that, you can look at the facts and you can come to your own conclusions about that. But at the end of the day, there's really no way to know if Richard Spencer is an agent of the U.S. government or the Russian government or the Israeli government or whatever. So we need a way to surmount these problems, or else there's never going to be a functional organization that can put America back in the hands of the American people. And since America does so much bad shit in the world, I think it's probably the responsibility of the American people to take control of their government again and maybe stop doing all the shenanigans, both here and overseas, that cause so many problems for other people. So that would be a noble thing, both for ourselves and for our friends elsewhere in the world, or our potential friends. So there's two concepts that I think are both ultimately based in computer science that, if they could be implemented, I think that would go a long way towards solving these problems. The first one is called proof of work. If you have ever posted a comment on a lot of websites on the internet, or if you've ever accessed accounts, if you've ever logged into accounts over a VPN, you have probably filled out a thing called a CAPTCHA. And what it is, it's basically just requiring you to put in effort. And the ideal would be to put in effort that only a human can do and that a robot couldn't do, but there's always an arms race there. But either way, it requires work, it requires effort. And what that does is weed out all of the how can we say this? All of the people who are in bad faith, all of the effort that is done in bad faith. So if I'm trying to log into your email by guessing the password, and I'm guessing it 1,000 times a second as a computer, as a hacking program, my efforts will be much reduced if I also have to fill out one of these challenges by clicking these boxes or solving a puzzle or some kind of thing like that. So I'm going to either go from 1,000 a second to 1 a second or 1 every 15 seconds, and my ability to hack your email just goes down drastically through guessing those passwords. It also slows people down who might, for example, want to be flooding a message board with comments. If you have to do this puzzle every time, then it quickly becomes not worth your while because you can't spam it anymore. So what we would have to do basically would be to figure out what would be acceptable to a group of people who are not all in agreement with each other, but who basically have a general understanding between each other, of not how we're going to get to where we want to go, but where we do want to go. And then maybe we can all decide what general type of action will be acceptable as proof of moving in that direction. So what I'm trying to get at is by saying if you can figure out some type of actions that people can take that would only be acceptable to us and would be utterly antithetical to the regime, the opposition, the adversary, whoever your enemy is, something that they could not do because it was directly opposed to their nature, and you make performing that action as a fundamental building block of your organization, then you've done great. Just as an example of something I've thought of, handing out flyers, let's say, or posting flyers up in different places. As long as the ideological content of those flyers is general and does not benefit a specific organization, the regime would have a really difficult time sending its agents to do that. If the flyers were benefiting a specific person or organization, then they could always just try to redirect those efforts to their own agents, sleeper agents or whatever, and try to ultimately get the benefit of that action. But if they were very general, and if they expressed an ideological viewpoint that everybody could get behind in an organization, then doing this kind of action would have to be acceptable as proof of work. And if we could come up with about 10 of those, then we'd be doing great. So then after that, you've got to have some kind of way to keep track of all this stuff, and you've got to have a way to keep track of it and link it back to personalities, individuals, so that people get credit for their work. And the thing that I thought of for that is something called the web of trust. If you've ever used encrypted email, everybody has an encryption code for their account, and they've got a way to unlock emails. The short you can go read about it. It's not too complicated, but if I try to explain it, I might mess it up. But the basic version is you meet someone in person, and you now trust, and they tell you what their email is. So you now have a very strong personal belief that the email address that they've given you really belongs to them. So you leave a digital signature in a public place saying that you will vouch that that email actually belongs to that person and it's not a fake account. When you have a whole bunch of people who have an interlocking network of which email accounts they've verified for each other, you have what's called a web of trust. And since these things are left in a public place that anyone can go read, it's essentially decentralized. Internet websites, they're granted certificates by a certificate authority. It's just some organization sitting out in space somewhere that says this website's good and that website's bad. But that's always vulnerable to some malicious actor with a lot of power, like a state, like a regime, like our enemies, who can just take that thing over and redirect traffic wherever they want. We have to have something that's decentralized, because the type of activity that we're engaged in is trying to subvert an evil, destructive regime. So we've got to have something decentralized, and I think the way that the PGP or Web of Trust stuff works would be good too. And you have to have some sort of way of keeping track of the actual effort that people are putting in. I don't know, maybe that could take care of it too, or maybe you would have to have something semi-anonymous, like the blockchain stuff, and link that to the Web of Trust just to keep track of what people are doing over time. But it seems to me like this would have to be the direction that people would need to move in order to figure out who just wants to be a goddamn internet celebrity and make money off of Patreon, and who actually wants to be the change in the world that they want to see, who wants to really, do the real stuff. And, they're not completely, those things do overlap a little bit, right? If somebody's out there spewing out really good propaganda for us, and it changes people's minds, that is good. But I think that ultimately there has to be a distinction between the people who really want to do the stuff, and then the people who want to hem and haw and hedge and change their minds based on how the trends are moving. rather than what they really believe. So I've been thinking about this for a while, but this is the first time that I've said all this out loud. If you have any comments, I'd be grateful if you could share them with me. Thank you for your time.